Pay close attention. The news you are about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins. Well, in the news this week, we're going to be covering the global trade tensions between China and the U.S. They may be taking a turn for the worse. We'll have those details. Also, the U.S. is sending a clear message, a powerful message to the Middle East, specifically Iran, wanting to let them know who's in charge.
Right.
And also one analyst's thoughts on how we could have an accidental nuclear war. So that's kind of a scary point to think about right there, an accidental nuclear war. So these stories and more. But first, we spoke about this a few weeks ago, but felt it important to bring this report to our viewers again because of the situation. Now, the CDC has added Candida auris to its urgent threat list, and it is indeed something the public should be aware of. Candida auris is a fungal infection resistant to treatment, and the number of cases are continuing to grow.
Well, in an article published in the New York Times, they called it a mystery infection spanning the globe in a climate of secrecy. The popular newspaper warns the rise of Candida auris embodies a serious and growing public health threat, drug-resistant germs.
Now, one example was given of a patient who had left the hospital and the entire room that they had been in was treated as a biohazard. Now, the fungus covered the entire room from ceiling to floor, including every object like the bed and even the blinds. Now, therefore, the CDC is warning healthcare workers to take extra precautions at work.
An internal medicine specialist, Dr. Nita Ogden, explained to CBS News why we should be extremely concerned about this particular fungus, saying it's resistant to multiple antifungal drugs that we have, and it's also resistant to all the things that we used to eradicate bacterial and fungal strains in the hospital.
Well, she gave an example of a hospital room in London where they used sodium hydroxide to aerosolize the room, and afterwards only one organism grew back, which was Candida auris. So, Ogden stated, this is definitely an alarming development in the global emerging threat of superbugs. And that is a scary thought, using something like sodium hydroxide and not even being able to kill, having that grow back.
That's right, that's right. Well, she went on to explain those at risk, greatest risk, that is, of infection are people with weakened immune systems, such as long-term healthcare facility residences who have internal catheters or IVs, anyone in hospitals, intensive care units, newborns, and anyone who takes immune-suppressing drugs for illnesses like diabetes. So that covers a fairly large number of people already, but there's an even greater concern if this superbug is not gotten under control, how it will affect the rest of the population.
Well, currently there have been 587 cases reported in the U.S., 309 in New York, 104 in New Jersey, and 1 in Connecticut. Now, while doctors are trying to learn as much as they can about this drug-resistant superbug that seems to be spreading quickly, there is little they can do to help those infected. Now, one doctor from the NASA University Medical Center in New York told reporters, you may be treating it with an ineffective drug.
Wow. Well, in other medical news, a new report is out exposing another growing epidemic in the medical field today. Now, this is called opioid diversion, which means healthcare professionals are stealing their patients' prescriptions for their own personal use. In 2018, over 47 million prescriptions alone were stolen.
Wow, 47 million. Well, CBS Evening News interviewed Lauren Lolini, one woman who experienced life-altering consequences due to opioid diversion. Now, in 2009, she went to the hospital for kidney surgery and left with hepatitis C and a liver infection. Lolini reported, "My life dramatically changed because now I am a 40-year-old woman with a 1-year-old daughter who is so fatigued I can't work."
Yeah, that's horrible. A hospital technician who infected Lolini and at least 18 others was Christian Parker. Parker, who is now serving a 30-year jail sentence, stole Lolini's pain meds and then filled the contaminated syringe with saline and returned it to the surgical tray she got them from.
Well, the data firm known as Protenus released their findings this week that show opioid diversion is a growing problem. The 47 million plus prescriptions stolen last year was a 126% increase from 2017. Now, they also found in 67% of the cases, doctors and nurses were the ones responsible, and those are the ones that you're supposed to be trusting and are responsible. You're supposed to be trusting them with your health, and 67% were found to be the ones that were actually stealing.
That's right. It's more of a problem internally than it is externally. Well, Dr. Stephen Lloyd of Tennessee was one such doctor. For Dr. Lloyd, it began with just half of a pain pill his dentist had given him a few weeks earlier from a dental procedure. Then some Loratab pain pills he had found in his aunt's medicine cabinet, and in just 3.5 years he went from half of a 5 milligram Loratab to 500 milligrams of OxyContin. That's like taking 100 Vicodin pills every day.
Wow. Well, one way he got the drugs was by prescribing his patients a stronger form of the drug they were already on, and he would collect the lesser strength pain meds from them. Now, because there isn't a requirement for what is done with the old pills, it wasn't known if they were flushed down the toilet or put in his pocket. Now, finally, his father told him he had a problem, and Lloyd admitted himself to a 30-day rehab center.
Well, today Lloyd is still a practicing physician and oversees Tennessee's Substance Abuse Services Department as the assistant commissioner. He's a strong advocate for California's Proposition 46, which would require random drug and alcohol testing for doctors as well as other measures. Dr. Lloyd warns that without making changes, many more patients are at risk of being cared for by medical professionals who are getting high on their prescriptions.
Wow, scary thought. Well, we now focus our attention on some of the world events, including a recent message the U.S. is sending to Iran. Our field correspondent Larry McGee has been covering this story as well as a few others. Larry, just what exactly is the message that the U.S. is sending to the Middle East, specifically for Iran?
Certain elements within the United States have set their minds to gain control of Iran, and there is apparently nothing that can cause them to alter that objective. In one of their boldest moves to date, the U.S. recently dispatched an aircraft carrier group to the Middle East in a bid to send a clear message to Iran. Analysts say the carriers being sent to the region isn't so much an abnormality, but it's rather the kind of carriers that are being sent, which in this case is more like a battle group, also accompanied by bombers. That, plus aggressive rhetoric by Advisor Bolton, is what's getting everyone's attention. Among other things, Security Advisor Bolton has hitched on to the deployment of the battle group the statement that any attack on United States interests or on those of our allies will be met with unrelenting force. As a pretext for the action, the United States reports having received intelligence alluding to potential Iranian attacks on American soil and in American waters. Tensions on behalf of Tehran are believed to have escalated after the U.S. declared the Iranian Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization, and then there are also U.S. sanctions which are geared towards destroying Iran's oil exports. The nation's foreign minister, Javad Zarif, has stated that he believes that the current U.S. administration is setting things in place for accidents to happen. He attributes these efforts to what he calls the B team, made up of Advisor Bolton, Benjamin Netanyahu, Sheikh Khalif bin Zayed, and bin Salman, who all want confrontation, according to Zarif. The Iranian foreign minister says that he believes it is important for the prudent people, the grown-ups, to prevent that confrontation. Nations are confronting each other not just militarily, but economically as well. The money war between China and the U.S. is still going at a rolling boil, and President Trump just turned the heat up by increasing tariffs on China yet again. Subsequent to that, Beijing released a statement saying that China deeply regrets that it will have to take necessary countermeasures. In layman terms, that means retaliation and tit for tat in response to the new taxes that are reported to potentially span everything from U.S. agricultural products, machinery, energy, and natural gas. The new tariffs, which represent a 25% increase on Chinese imports, are said to total $250 billion and were levied by the president right in the middle of economic negotiations. There seems to be no negotiating with Iran. In addition to other actions, America is mulling over a plan to deploy 10,000 soldiers to the Middle East in response to alleged attacks. The acting Secretary of Defense, Patrick Shanahan, stated to reporters that America's objective at this point is to avoid a miscalculation by Iran. Strangely, the acting secretary says the U.S.'s latest moves have been about deterrence and not war. To this, Senator Lindsey Graham added that he believes the best thing is for everyone to calm down and for Iran to back off, and he is hoping that the show of force will result in de-escalating and not escalating. Things are escalating between House Democrats and the president after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi accused the president of a cover-up for being uncooperative in a congressional investigation. After calling off a meeting with Democrats, President Trump says he will not work with the Blue Party until they stop investigating him. Ms. Pelosi has accused the president further of throwing tantrums and of obstructing justice and participating in a cover-up, and that, she says, could be an impeachable offense. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Kassan Jeff, back to you.
Well, based on what we've seen in times past and the comments made by the Iranian President Ayatollah Khomeini, Iran is not going to take this lying down, and they are preparing themselves and their people for some type of conflict with the United States. Ironically, the United States is kind of trying to force other countries to come into peace with them when it's obvious that the United States does not have peace and unity within their own government.
Right, and even though our representatives are saying this is for a deterrent only, the other nations are not looking at it as just a deterrent. They're preparing for war.
That's right. Well, the U.S. State Department said it's expecting new chemical attacks by Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Washington is also promising a quick response to such attacks, despite not having proven the previous attacks had anything to do with the Syrian government. Now, all of this coming after U.S. President Donald Trump said he was pressured by the U.S. arms industry to keep hundreds of American soldiers in Syria.
Also, who does make the decision on U.S. foreign policy regarding the use of military force? Well, one might say the president, of course, but recent statements from President Trump would lead one to believe differently. Now, in a Fox News interview, President Trump said, "You do have a military-industrial complex. They do like war." Well, the president went on to say, "I said I want to bring our troops home, and the place went crazy. You have people here in Washington, they never want to leave," of course referring to Syria and these countries that were involved in, almost like we've covered before, the war is big business, right, and they don't want that business to end.
Yeah, superficially, you would think if the United States, as the big brother to the world, is working to bring peace, once we've reached a certain point, let's pull our troops out of there. But that's not the case. Like you mentioned, big business, big money. Well, the Trump presidency is not the only president that has promised peace prior to being elected. President, and then once in office, turned around or was pressured, as he said, into starting a war. Take a look at this video courtesy of RT on a few other recent examples.
Nations making progress toward freedom will find America is their friend. We'll promote our values. We'll promote the peace.
We've lost thousands of American lives, spent nearly $1 trillion, alienated allies, neglected emerging threats, all in the cause of fighting a war for well over 5 years in a country that had absolutely nothing to do with the 9/11 attacks.
I will never send our finest into battle unless necessary, and I mean absolutely necessary, and will only do so if we have a plan for victory with a capital V.
Well, it certainly is hard to argue with the history they just showed. Well, the U.S. just sent 2 warships through the Taiwan Straits with the eyes on China, closely monitoring the situation and straining U.S.-China relations. Now, this is looked as a move by the Trump administration supporting the small island, who says that it is its own independent nation, whereas Beijing says that there's only one China and that Taiwan belongs to them. Now, Commander Clay Doss, a spokesman for the U.S. Navy, said that the ship's transit through the strait demonstrates the U.S. commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Well, this isn't new, as the U.S. sends ships through the straits at least once a month since last July, but has increased these naval exercises in recent months. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lu Kong, said, "We are fully aware of the whole process and we have expressed concern to the U.S. side. The Taiwan issue is the most sensitive and important issue in China-U.S. relations. We urge the U.S. to uphold the One China principle and abide by the regulations of the Three China U.S. Joint Communique and properly deal with Taiwan-related issues with caution so as to avoid further negative actions to China-U.S. relations and to maintain peace and stability in the Taiwan Straits."
Well, the threat of nuclear war is ringing alarm bells across the globe. Jim Jontras, a former U.S. diplomat, spoke to RT regarding the U.S. threat and America's part after a UN official warned that the world is closer to nuclear war than ever before. Now, he stated we and the Russians have the most nuclear weapons and that at the beginning of the Cold Wars, measures were set up to avoid the dangers of an accidental war. Now, accidental is that one country could misread the other's intentions, potentially like with Iran and even the Russians.
And that could lead to that preemptive strike that several U.S. commanders have even mentioned that the Trump administration and defense ministers and so forth, secretaries have said, hey, look, all options are on the table. And so we already know that that's kind of in the cards that, hey, if necessary, we will preemptively strike if we think that there is a threat threatening our nation. Well, he continues, since we've gotten rid of the INF agreement, referring to medium-range missiles, and not knowing the fate of the START agreement, now that details intercontinental ballistic missiles, we don't know if those mechanisms of communication is breaking down to where the one side, especially if they have very little advance warning of possible attacks, might misread the other side's intentions.
Right, and it's really not that unreasonable to think, because the tensions are so high all over that, to misread someone seems like a very possible and likely situation to occur.
That's right.
Well, as the Trump administration gets closer to a date to unveil its long-awaited Mideast peace plan, the U.S. is planning on hosting a summit in Bahrain, a summit which the Palestinians vow to boycott. Now, it's an attempt to force the economic track over the political track, said Ahmed Mahdalani, an executive committee member of social development for the PLO. Now, he continued, more Palestinians want to end the occupation, not improve their lives under the occupation.
There are others from the Arab world that are lending their support for the Trump administration. The foreign ministers of Bahrain said the Kingdom of Bahrain hosting of the Peace Workshop for Prosperity is a continuation of its continuous and supportive approach to enable the Palestinian people to enhance their capabilities and strengthen their resources to achieve their legitimate aspiration. Also, the Kingdom of Jordan may also agree to the deal to appeal to the United States. And as we know, the Jordan holds they're kind of the governorship over that area there, that Temple Mount area, And so they are also have great relations with the United States.
Well, Jared Kushner's Middle East peace plan is shaping up and is closer to the day of the big reveal. Now, Kushner said that what we hope to do is to get to a great starting point, one that will get the Israelis and Palestinians to talking. Now, in that region, you have leaders that are trying to empower their people to have a better life, and you have leaders who are trying to repress their people using religion and other excuses as a reason to try to hold their people down.
Right now, it's unclear if anything in the plan will include the two-state solution. Kushner said, what we want to do is put something out based on logic where we can say that unquestionably this will lead to the Palestinians having a better life. But after the Palestinian leaders cut off diplomatic ties to the U.S. after President Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the question is, how does the U.S. reach them as a mediator to get the talk started?
Well, Israel is a very important country. It's the only democracy in the region as America's strongest ally, and that no one should be surprised if we ask Israel to make compromises in the deal. Now, Kushner also said that the deal offers Palestinians positive business solutions with economic incentives. Now, the plan is said to be released following the conclusion of the month of Ramadan.
That's right. And I know that everybody's waiting for this plan to be released, but we can see with kind of everything building, the tensions building around that area with Israel, and of course not just the Palestinians, but the entire Arab world. We see the tensions with Iran, we see the tensions with Syria. Whatever the case, we know that if something is not done to bring about some type of peaceful solution, as we mentioned several broadcasts ago with the doomsday clock being only 2 minutes to midnight, it's going to escalate to nuclear wars. And that's not just something that a few people agree on. That's what the majority of the nations know the direction of our world is heading to.
Yeah, and it's, as you mentioned there, with that, with the threat of nuclear war, now they're saying that it's never been higher since the end of World War II, of course, when the nuclear bombs were used at that time. So we're at that point again. They're not saying if, but when nuclear war comes. So with this peace plan, they've certainly built it up as something very big. It will be interesting to see how the Palestinians and the Israelis react. But certainly it's going to take quite a plan to bring them together because of all the hatred for the years that they've built up, just back and forth. And now it's almost as if they don't want to agree on anything, no matter if it would benefit them or not. So again, very interesting. And we're definitely awaiting the revealing here of this plan.
That's right. And like we've mentioned before, we are seeing China and Russia step up to the plate as well to get themselves involved in bringing some type of peace in the Middle East. China, especially with Iran, since Iran supplies the majority, a great portion of their oil. You know, they don't want to see that cut off. So
right, it seems like all the big players have a stake
That's
in what turns out with Israel and the Palestinians.
That's right. Well, if you'd like to find out more about current prophecy and like we've mentioned before, what you can do to prepare yourself and your family to be safe for the impending danger of nuclear war, which everybody pretty much in the world agrees is the direction we're heading, contact the House of Yahweh. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the prophetic word and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
Well, to contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by emailing info@Yahweh.com. For any international calls, call the number that's on your screen now. And once again, if you still haven't checked out the two programs, the Yisrael Says program and the Ask Yisrael program, you can do so by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com. These are two excellent Bible study tools guaranteed to answer any of your scriptural questions, keep you occupied for hours looking at the scriptures and seeing precept upon precept, line upon line. Check it out. You'll greatly enjoy it.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.